He thought she would bow her head and disappear in shame, but he had no idea he was about to destroy his own reputation in front of the entire room. The billionaire adjusted his cufflinks and looked at the poor waitress as if she were invisible. The restaurant was glowing with golden lights and soft music, and the city's elite filled every table, whispering deals and secrets. He had chosen this place to impress foreign investors, and he believed everyone there was beneath him, especially the staff. The waitress moved quietly between tables, carrying plates with calm precision. Her uniform was simple, her hair tied back neatly, her eyes focused and steady. She had learned long ago how to make herself small in rooms where money spoke louder than humanity. The billionaire noticed her when she accidentally brushed his chair while serving wine. Instead of ignoring it, he saw an opportunity to entertain his guests. He leaned back in his seat and began speaking loudly in French, mocking her posture, criticizing her appearance, and joking that she probably did not even understand the language. His friends laughed, believing they were safe inside a language they assumed no one else in the room could understand. The waitress froze for a brief second. Her hands tightened around the tray, but her face remained composed. She had once walked the marble halls of the Sorbonne, carrying books heavier than the plates she now served. She had debated philosophy in classrooms filled with brilliant minds and dreamed of becoming a professor before life pulled the ground from beneath her feet. Financial hardship and family illness had forced her to abandon her PhD and return home, where survival mattered more than academic titles. Yet knowledge had never left her. The billionaire continued his cruel performance. Switching to more complex French phrases to show off, he spoke about how some people were born to serve and others were born to rule. He laughed at his own cleverness, and his guests followed eagerly. The waitress stepped forward, gently placed the wine bottle on the table, and in flawless Parisian French responded with a calm voice that cut through the laughter like glass. She corrected his grammar first. Then she addressed his insults one by one, dismantling his assumptions with precision. She quoted Voltaire about dignity and justice. Her pronunciation carried the elegance of years spent in lecture halls. The table fell silent. The billionaire's smile faded. His guests stared at him, then at her, as if the ground had shifted beneath their feet. She did not raise her voice. She did not show anger. She simply held a mirror to his arrogance and let him see himself clearly. She explained that intelligence is not measured by wealth and that education does not vanish when circumstances change. She thanked him politely for the opportunity to practice a language she had studied at one of the most prestigious universities in the world. The investors exchanged glances, sensing something deeper than a simple exchange of words. The power dynamic in the room had transformed. The billionaire attempted to laugh it off, but his voice trembled slightly. He tried to regain control by questioning her background, challenging her credentials in the same language, thinking perhaps she had memorized a few phrases. She answered every question with scholarly depth, referencing her thesis research and academic mentors. Her knowledge flowed naturally, effortlessly, undeniable. The humiliation he had planned for her had circled back to him. The surrounding tables had grown quiet as people sensed drama unfolding. The manager stood frozen, unsure whether to intervene. The waitress finished by saying that respect costs nothing, but its absence can cost everything. She bowed her head slightly and returned to her duties, leaving behind a silence heavier than any insult. The billionaire felt the weight of unfamiliar embarrassment. His investors whispered among themselves, evaluating not just his business acumen, but his character. For the first time that evening, he was not the most powerful person in the room. The waitress continued serving other guests with the same professionalism as before, but inside her heart was racing. She had not planned to reveal her past yet. She refused to let ignorance define her. The night moved forward, yet something irreversible had begun. A single moment of courage had shifted the energy of the restaurant, and everyone present felt it. The billionaire stared at his reflection in the darkened window, questioning How control had slipped from his hands while the waitress quietly reclaimed a piece of her dignity that no amount of money could purchase. The silence that followed lingered long after she walked away from the table, and though conversations slowly resumed, the atmosphere had changed in a way that could not be undone. The billionaire forced a smile and attempted to redirect the discussion toward contracts and projected profits, yet his voice lacked the dominance it once carried. His investors listened politely, but their curiosity had shifted. They were no longer studying the numbers on the documents before them. They were studying him, measuring the depth of his character against the calm brilliance of the waitress who had just exposed his arrogance. Without intending to, she had introduced doubt into a room built on confidence. Meanwhile, she moved from table to table, maintaining the same steady rhythm of service, though her thoughts drifted back to another life filled with libraries and late night research sessions in Paris. She remembered the cold mornings crossing the Seine, clutching her notebooks filled with annotations about political philosophy and social ethics. She remembered defending her thesis proposal before a panel of respected scholars who saw promise in her future and encouraged her to continue pushing boundaries she had believed knowledge could change systems, and that education was the most powerful equalizer. Yet, when her father fell ill and medical bills multiplied, she returned home without ceremony, packing away her academic dreams in a suitcase that still rested beneath her small apartment. Bedworking as a waitress was never part of her plan, but dignity had never required a title, and she carried herself with the same discipline she once applied to research. The billionaire, however, was unraveling internally. He replayed her flawless pronunciation in his mind, the effortless way she corrected him, and the subtle authority in her tone. He had built an empire from aggressive negotiations and calculated risks, yet he had never prepared for intellectual confrontation from someone he dismissed as insignificant. His pride urged him to retaliate, to reclaim dominance, yet something deeper unsettled him. He sensed that any further attempt would only deepen his embarrassment. The investors quietly excused themselves earlier than planned, offering neutral reasons, yet their eyes avoided his. He realized that reputation travels faster than wealth, and that tonight would echo beyond the walls of the restaurant. Determined to regain control, he called the manager, demanding information about the waitress, expecting to uncover some flaw that would restore his superiority. The manager hesitated, explaining that she was one of their most reliable employees. Punctual, composed, respected by staff and customers alike, there had never been complaints, only praise. The billionaire felt irritation rising, not because she had failed in her duties, but because she had exceeded them. He returned to his table alone, the empty chairs around him symbolizing a subtle but undeniable loss. Across the room she sensed his gaze, yet refused to meet it. She understood that power often reacts aggressively when challenged, and she prepared herself for possible consequences. Still, she did not regret speaking out. Silence would have been easier, but it would have confirmed his narrative that status determines worth. Instead, she had chosen truth. Her shift ended near midnight, and as she changed out of her uniform, she felt exhaustion settle into her bones, not from physical labor, but from emotional intensity. She stepped outside into the cool night air, breathing deeply beneath the city lights, unaware that several diners had recorded the exchange on their phones. In an age where moments become movements, within hours, the story had already begun. To travel online, viewers were captivated by the image of a poised waitress dismantling a billionaire in fluent French, comment sections filled with admiration, calling her brave, intelligent, inspiring, while questioning the conduct of the powerful man who underestimated her. By the time she reached her apartment, messages from former classmates in Paris appeared on her social media, expressing pride and astonishment at seeing her again. They had assumed she was still immersed in academia, unaware of the sacrifices she had made. She read their words with mixed emotions: gratitude for recognition and pain for unfinished dreams. The billionaire, meanwhile, faced a different reality. His public relations team contacted him early the next morning. informing him that the video was spreading rapidly. Investors were requesting clarification. Some partnerships were being reconsidered not because of financial instability, but because of ethical concerns. He watched the clip repeatedly, noticing details he had ignored in the moment: the steady composure in her posture, the clarity in her voice, the visible discomfort among his guests. He realized that intelligence combined with integrity commands a respect money cannot buy. For the first time in years, he felt small, not because he lacked resources, but because he lacked humility. As public support for the Waitress grew, journalists sought her perspective, yet she declined interviews, initially unsure whether she wanted her private struggles exposed. She valued privacy and feared being reduced to a viral headline. Still, she understood that the conversation extended beyond her personal story. It was about how society assigns value based on appearance and occupation. She spent the day reflecting on her academic notes still preserved in worn folders, wondering if perhaps knowledge was calling her back in an unexpected way. The billionaire wrestled with a choice: apologize sincerely or attempt damage control through influence. One path required vulnerability, the other manipulation. He had mastered control, but vulnerability felt foreign. Yet every advisor he consulted emphasized that arrogance would only deepen the crisis. Meanwhile, the Waitress sat by her window watching the sunrise over modest rooftops, realizing that the moment she defended her dignity, she had unknowingly reopened a door she once believed permanently closed. The world was watching now, and her courage had ignited conversations far beyond a single restaurant table. By the third day, the story had crossed borders, and what began as a quiet act of self-respect inside a restaurant had transformed into a national conversation about class, education, and dignity. Morning shows debated the meaning of intelligence and whether society too quickly equates wealth with worth. University professors shared the clip in lectures discussing power dynamics and linguistic privilege. Students reposted her words alongside quotes from philosophers she once studied, and strangers began calling her a symbol of courage, though she still woke up in the same small apartment with unpaid bills stacked on her kitchen table. The attention felt surreal, as if she were observing someone else's life from a distance. Yet, beneath the noise, she felt something steady, returning a sense of purpose she had buried when she left the Sorbonne. Her former academic advisor reached out with a long message expressing pride and reminding her that scholarship is not confined to institutions. He wrote that true intellectuals reveal themselves not through titles, but through moments of moral clarity. Reading his words stirred memories of unfinished chapters and research questions that once kept her awake with excitement. Meanwhile, the billionaire faced consequences that no financial strategy could immediately fix. Sponsors paused collaborations, citing concerns about brand values. Its board requested a formal statement. Investors who once admired his bold confidence now questioned his judgment. He drafted several responses, each one sounding defensive or rehearsed, until he finally confronted a truth he had avoided for years. Success had insulated him from accountability. He had grown accustomed to rooms where no one challenged him, and he mistook silence for respect. The video forced him to see how fragile admiration becomes when stripped of ethics. For the first time, he considered what leadership truly meant beyond profit margins. In an unexpected turn, a prominent educational foundation contacted the Waitress, offering to fund the completion of her doctorate if she wished to return to academia. They emphasized that her public composure reflected the very qualities they sought to promote: resilience, scholarship, and social impact. She read the email repeatedly, her hands trembling, not from fear, but from possibility. Accepting would mean stepping back into a world she loved, yet it would also require confronting the pain of why she left. She visited her father's grave that evening, speaking softly about the chance unfolding before her. She felt that pursuing her studies would honor the sacrifices that once forced her to stop. The city buzzed with opinions, yet her decision felt deeply personal, not driven by fame but by calling. Days later, the billionaire requested a private meeting through the restaurant manager. This time there were no investors, no audience, no polished stage. He arrived alone, dressed simply, without the theatrical confidence. He once swore she agreed to meet in a quiet corner before her shift began. He spoke first in measured tones, acknowledging his arrogance, admitting that he had used language as a weapon to belittle rather than connect. He did not excuse his behavior or blame circumstance. He apologized directly, recognizing the harm of his assumptions. She listened carefully, observing whether his words carried sincerity or strategy. What she saw surprised her. He appeared humbled, not by public backlash alone, but by genuine reflection. She responded that apology is meaningful only when followed by change, and that power carries responsibility beyond personal pride. Their conversation extended beyond that night, touching on education, inequality, and the invisible barriers faced by those forced to trade dreams for survival. He confessed that he had never considered how easily opportunity had flowed in his own life. She explained that dignity remains constant even when circumstances shift. By the end of their discussion, something subtle shifted between them. Not friendship, not alliance, but mutual recognition of humanity. The billionaire later announced a substantial investment in scholarship programs for underprivileged students, partnering with educational institutions to expand access to higher learning. Critics questioned whether it was reputation repair. Yet over time, the programs produced tangible results, granting opportunities to hundreds who might otherwise have been overlooked. His actions did not erase his mistake, but they demonstrated growth. The waitress accepted the foundation offer, returning to Paris months later, where she resumed her research with renewed determination. The lecture halls felt familiar, yet she carried new depth shaped by lived experience. She incorporated themes of social perception and class bias into her work, drawing from the night that changed her path. Students listened intently, aware that their professor spoke not only from theory, but from courage tested in real life. The viral video gradually faded from headlines, replaced by news stories, yet its impact lingered in quiet transformations. The billionaire learned that authority without empathy isolates, while the former waitress proved that knowledge anchored in dignity cannot be diminished by circumstance. Years later, when she defended her completed thesis, the applause echoed through the hall. Not just for academic excellence, but for resilience. She had reclaimed her narrative, not through revenge, but through integrity. The moment he tried to humiliate her became the moment she rediscovered her voice, and in that reversal lay the true measure of justice, proving that intelligence paired with courage has the power to reshape destinies long after the laughter fades.